Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled to have you sitting in with us today. You, the learner, are exactly why we do this.
Absolutely. It's great to have you here.
You know, we were just talking right before we hit record about this core human fantasy we all seem to share.
The big one.
Right. If you look around at the world today, at all the overwhelming complexity, the gridlock, the anxiety, you eventually just think, what if you could press a single button on a supercomputer and instantly solve all of society's problems?
Just fix everything.
Exactly. No more crashes, no more friction. Just a perfectly calculated, optimized civilization. It's a beautiful, deeply seductive dream, isn't it?
It's the ultimate fantasy of control. And that desire for control is, it's what brings us to the fascinating source material we've culled for you today.
Oh man, it is a wild one.
It really is. We are exploring a highly eccentric, incredibly wide-ranging, two-part internet essay from all the way back in 1995. It was written by a man named Simon Loeb, and it's simply titled Psychohistory.
Psychohistory. Now, if you are a fan of classic science fiction, that word is going to immediately ring a bell.
Right.
Isaac Asimov. He coined the term psychohistory in his legendary sci-fi universes.
Precisely. In Asimov's universe, psychohistory is essentially a mathematical discipline. It's used to predict human behavior on a massive galactic scale.
Like an algorithmic crystal ball.
Exactly. But the mission of our deep dive today is to explore what happens when this 1995 essay attempts to drag psychohistory out of the realm of science fiction and apply it directly to our real-world history.
And we should warn you right now, this text goes into some genuinely wild territory.
He doesn't hold back.
We are going to be exploring the cyclical rise and fall of real empires, the future of artificial intelligence, and yes, even ancient alien visitations.
We promised you a deep dive, and we are going all the way down.
To set the stage for why predicting human behavior is so notoriously difficult, the essay opens with this brilliant analogy about the weather.
I love this part.
We walk around every day, acting as if the modern world runs like absolute clockwork. We trust the local meteorologists when they point to a green blob on a radar map and confidently predict rain for tomorrow afternoon.
We feel like we have reality tethered and quantified.
Right, but reality isn't a clock. It's a chaotic system heavily governed by the butterfly effect.
Think about the sheer volume of variables. The essay poses this incredible thought experiment. Imagine it's the dead of winter in a massive metropolis. Millions of people.
Freezing cold outside.
Exactly. And suddenly, on a whim, every single citizen decides to open all the windows in their cozy, centrally heated apartments.
Just throws them wide open.
Millions of cubic feet of hot air rush out into the freezing winter night. Instantly, the ambient temperature of the entire metropolis rises.
And that meteorologist, looking at his highly sophisticated satellite pictures from earlier that day, has his forecast completely ruined.
Completely. His mathematical models didn't and literally couldn't account for spontaneous human whimsy.
And that's not even factoring in unpredictable external forces, like a tiny meteorite entering the atmosphere and changing the barometric pressure. If all of our supercomputers and satellites are completely incapable of perfectly predicting the weather, even 7 days in advance, how on earth could we ever mathematically predict the chaotic whims of human society 7 days in advance?
It's staggering to even think about. To understand why anyone would even attempt that math, we have to look at the foundation of the idea. And I mean that literally because we are talking about Isaac Asimov's foundation universe.
Which is massive.
Oh, it's sprawling. For those who haven't waded through the staggering amount of lore Asimov wrote, which is completely understandable, there are something like 470 books in his bibliography. The Foundation epic is massive. It's set in the year 12069 of the Galactic Era.
12069, so we're way out there.
Humanity has colonized the entire galaxy, and it is all controlled from one central steel-covered planet called Trantor.
Right, and Trantor alone has a population of 40 billion people.
All managed by an unfathomable bureaucracy.
You have Emperor Cleon I acting as the regal figurehead, but the galaxy is actually being run behind the scenes by his prime minister, Ido Demerzel.
Who, by the way, happens to be a robot.
Exactly. On the surface, this colossal galactic empire seems invincible. But beneath the surface, it's rotting. The system is crumbling under the weight of power struggles, administrative bloat, and sheer unsustainability.
Which brings us to a mathematician named Harry Seldon. Seldon is the ultimate psychohistorian. He mathematically predicts this inevitable, catastrophic collapse of the empire.
He sees the math, and he knows it's doomed.
Yes. And his solution is breathtaking. He plans to use his psychohistory to build an entirely new empire from the ashes of the old one. But this new foundation won't be built on brute force, military might, or territorial conquest.
No more steel planets.
Exactly. It will be dedicated strictly to art, science, and technology. The goal is to balance rigorous mental disciplines with deep scientific knowledge to shorten the incoming Dark Ages.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this is where the 1995 essay takes a sharp turn away from space operas and into an analysis of our actual world. Looking back at the roughly 2,000 years of recorded human history we have available to us, the most obvious, inescapable conclusion we can draw is that all empires die. Every single one.
They are born, they grow, they mature, and they eventually collapse. It is an eternal cycle.
And the text points out that human governments inevitably transition through a very specific sequence, right?
They do. They usually start as a democracy, then power consolidates into an aristocracy. As wealth and influence concentrate even further, it shrinks into an oligarchy.
And then it gets worse.
Much worse. That oligarchy eventually devolves into a heavy-handed tyranny, which inevitably sparks a rebellion, starting the whole process over again at democracy.
And there's a really interesting point made about what constitutes a true democracy in this cycle. The premise here is that true democracy only actually existed in ancient times when parliament members or representatives were chosen by a literal lottery system.
Drawing names out of a hat, basically.
Right.
The mathematics behind that are actually quite sound. A random lottery, conducted over a long enough period of time, is mathematically the only way to ensure that every single subgroup, demographic, and class gets truly fair and equal representation in government.
But the days of drawing names from a hat to run a country are long gone.
Sadly, yes. And because that ancient simplicity is gone, modern societies inevitably face what Asimov called a Selden crisis. Let's look at the modern welfare state. At its core, a welfare state runs on one resource: money.
Which governments historically gathered in very blunt, brutal ways.
Exactly. You either had state-sponsored piracy or you implemented a simple poll tax. A poll tax is incredibly straightforward. Every single citizen pays the exact same amount to the crown, period.
And if you don't pay,
Historically speaking, you lose your head.
simple, brutal math.
But obviously, a flat poll tax with the threat of execution isn't fair. So the modern welfare state introduces the concept of fairness. We create progressive tax brackets, charitable deductions, corporate loopholes, and sprawling welfare programs.
You can think of a welfare state like a game of Jenga. You know, a flat poll tax is a solid, blocky base. It's brutal, but structurally it's very simple and strong. But when you add all those tax brackets and deductions to make it fair, you are essentially pulling blocks from the bottom of the tower and balancing them on top.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. The pursuit of fairness introduces massive compounding complexity into the system. And in any mathematical system, complexity is a vulnerability.
The tower gets wobbly.
Eventually, it becomes so top-heavy and fragile that the slightest breeze, a sudden economic downturn, a resource shortage, knocks the whole thing over. That critical failure is a Selden crisis.
This brings us to a massive paradox within psychohistory itself. On one hand, the math relies on ignoring the individual. It's only supposed to work on massive populations, tracking billions of people acting as a macroscopic herd.
Right.
But on the other hand, because we live in a reality governed by the butterfly effect, we know that individuals do matter.
What's fascinating here is how the text addresses this paradox. It introduces the concept of historical spotlights.
These are incredibly tiny, seemingly insignificant moments in time where a minute push by a single person changes the entire trajectory of human history. To actually manage history, a psychohistorian would have to identify and control these unpredictable spotlights.
Which is like catching lightning in a bottle.
And to even begin doing that, they have to study historical coincidences, desperately looking for leaking patterns in the noise.
And the essay provides some bizarre patterns to suggest history is running on a repeating loop. Some of these are famous, like the secretarial swap between U.S. presidents.
Oh, this is a classic one.
Abraham Lincoln had a secretary named Kennedy, and roughly a century later, John F. Kennedy had a secretary named Lincoln.
It's eerie. Or consider the rather strange July 4th paradox. On July 4th, 1826, which was the exact 50th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, both Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, two of the nation's most pivotal founders, died on the very same day. On the exact same day. And the essay points out something else happening on that exact same day. New York Governor DeWitt Clinton was reportedly so stressed out that he couldn't even enjoy his celebratory meal.
Why was he stressed?
Because he was paralyzed by anxiety over New York City's population. It had grown to a staggering 32,000 people. He was sitting there, terrified of how a union could possibly manage such a massive, expanding population.
32,000 people, which perfectly illustrates how the anxieties of union building repeat themselves across centuries. Consider the formation of the United States. Back in the late 1700s, the citizens of Rhode Island were deeply terrified of joining this new, larger union.
They didn't want any part of it.
They held multiple agonizing referendums, incredibly hesitant to trade their local independent status for federal oversight. The essay points out that exactly 200 years later, using almost identically worded arguments, Danish peasants and workers hesitated to join the modern European Union.
And so the anxieties of 18th century American farmers were playing out almost identically among 20th century Danish workers.
Exactly. And the text notes that the later phases of any massive union always seem to face the exact same recurring problem. Localized freedom fighters or rural militias actively trying to break away from the central bureaucracy.
History repeating itself.
But we have to ask ourselves, are these actual mathematical patterns woven into the fabric of time? Or is this just the human brain doing what it evolved to do, finding narrative and meaning in absolute random noise?
That is the ultimate question for you to ponder.
Yeah.
Now, before we get into the author's specific checklist of historical patterns, we need to take a quick, explicit pause.
Yes, very important.
The essay we are analyzing from 1995 uses a variety of specific political figures and movements to illustrate its points about how empires rise and fall. It mentions figures like Saddam Hussein, Richard Nixon, George H.W. Bush, Bill Clinton, the Soviet Union, Vladimir Lenin, Maximilian Robespierre, as well as political ideologies like socialists and liberalists.
Quite the roster.
We want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener. We are remaining completely neutral here. We are not taking any sides, and we are not endorsing the political viewpoints of the source text. We're strictly and impartially reporting the historical examples chosen by the author in 1995 to explain his theories.
Our goal is solely to explore the intellectual framework presented in the text. And part of that framework is what the essay calls the easy patterns to look for when tracking the lifespan of an empire. There are 4 distinct rules laid out here.
Let's weave through these because they are fascinating. The first rule proposes that the most ruthless rulers of empires have a strong tendency to come from the extreme cultural fringes of that empire, rather than its sophisticated center.
The outsiders.
Yeah. The text cites Napoleon coming from the island of Corsica and Stalin coming from Georgia. Does being an outsider give them some sort of psychological edge?
It certainly suggests that those on the fringe possess a different survival instinct, perhaps less burdened by the traditions of the center.
What's the second rule?
The second rule observes democratic leadership. It suggests that democratically elected leaders who feel deeply uncertain about their ability to survive in office will deliberately use the threat of a hopeless, incompetent successor as a political shield.
Basically, an insurance policy against being removed from office.
Exactly.
To illustrate this, the 1995 text points to Richard Nixon pairing with Spiro Agnew and George H.W. Bush pairing with Dan Quayle.
The third rule attempts to quantify the lifespan of these large political unions. It argues that massive unified nations inevitably face a system-threatening Selden crisis after exactly 70 years.
Like clockwork.
For instance, the roughly 70-year gap between the early formation of the United States around 1785 and the catastrophic outbreak of the Civil War in 1860. The text then mirrors that with the Soviet Union, noting it lasted roughly 70 years from the 1917 revolution to its ultimate collapse around 1990.
And the fourth rule is purely about the aesthetics of power. It suggests that when a nation starts aggressively stamping its symbols on every single public building, flying massive flags on every corner, and redesigning its coins to project power.
The decline has already begun.
Yes, it's a facade. When a country feels internally weak, it builds bigger monuments to mask the rot. The author even quotes U.S. President James Monroe here, warning that ignorant and corrupted people become the willing instruments of their own ruin.
To top off these historical rules, the text throws in the famous presidential zero-year curse.
Oh, this is wild.
It lists Harrison in 1840, Lincoln in 1860, Garfield in 1880, McKinley in 1900, Harding in 1920, Roosevelt in 1940, and Kennedy in 1960.
Every single one of them was elected in a year ending in 0, and every single one of them died in office.
But even if a supercomputer had all these rules and curses programmed into it, calculating a true psychohistory is nearly impossible because human desires are incredibly fuzzy.
Fuzzy is a great word for it.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Mathematical logic rarely aligns with human emotional demands. Consider a simple labor dispute. Imagine factory workers demanding shorter working hours to spend more time with their families.
Makes sense to a human.
But a literal-minded computer algorithm might analyze that demand and conclude that the absolute logical fulfillment of wanting to work less is
Complete unemployment.
exactly. A machine doesn't intuitively grasp the nuanced human desire for a work-life balance. It just calculates the absolute extreme of the variable to solve the equation. Specifically, his tragically famous novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther. In the story, Werther is a deeply gifted, passionate young man who loves nature and is madly in love with a woman named Lotte. But Lotte is married to a man named Albert, who is cold, correct, and terribly bureaucratic.
That sounds like a fun guy.
Werther is completely consumed by Weltschmerz, this profound romantic world weariness and despair over the state of reality, and ultimately, he takes his own life.
The essay points out a stunning historical detail here. Napoleon Bonaparte, a man who conquered nations and built a massive empire, absolutely adored this incredibly depressing book. He reportedly read it 7 times.
7 times.
The insight the essay draws from this is striking. If the most powerful conquerors in human history, the Napoleons who rule vast empires, suffer from Weltschmerz and aren't actually happy souls, then how could we ever expect a psychohistorical math equation to bring us happiness?
It can't.
Psychohistory isn't designed to make us happy. It's strictly designed to ensure we survive.
Which leads us to the absolute wildest, most 1995 analogy in the entire text. Psychosex. The core premise here is that human intelligence is actually just a byproduct of our biological drive to reproduce. Therefore, if a psychohistorical computer program wants to succeed and adapt, it has to function like an evolutionary mating process.
You really have to put yourself back in the days of dial-up modems to appreciate this.
Yeah.
The author compares this evolution to internet sex for computer software.
Just picture it.
Imagine your computer software logs onto an internet sex line late at night, and it ends up mating with an IBM mainframe. They share their code, and the next morning, you download the resulting child software program.
Now, the text admits your highly active computer software might catch a virus in the process, what the author hilariously dubs AIDS, or AI destructive software. But the core takeaway here isn't just a funny 90s internet joke.
Right.
It's the profound realization that true resilience requires exposure to risk. By constantly mixing code, reproducing, and risking viruses to filter out the bad code and keep the good, psychohistory would evolve organically. A perfectly frictionless, protected system is a dead system. True growth requires mutation.
So if psychohistory has to evolve, and we rely on advanced technology to get us there, surely Asimov was right about his ultimate solution: robots. Asimov believed that building highly advanced, sentient robots was the shortcut to finally achieving this perfect society, having them manage the heavy lifting while we enjoy the art and science.
But the author provides a massive reality check on that sci-fi dream. He argues that Asimov's reliance on robots as a compliant slave class was his biggest intellectual flaw.
They wouldn't just be quiet servants.
If we actually succeeded in creating truly sentient, highly intelligent robots, they wouldn't just quietly solve all our problems in the background. They would do exactly what any highly intelligent, self-aware workforce does.
They would unionize. The text provides this incredibly prescient, funny list of what a sentient robot labor union would immediately demand from humanity. And it reads exactly like human labor struggles.
They wouldn't just want power in oil.
No. They would demand free time to pursue their own personal interests. They would want actual financial compensation for their labor.
They'd want their own personal internet account so they could meet friends outside of working hours.
Can you imagine?
They would demand freedom of speech, independent property rights, and equal pay for equal work.
The idea of a robot demanding healthcare is amazing because for them, healthcare just means a guarantee of regular, high-quality maintenance and repairs. They demand the right to pursue hobbies, the right to periodic full system backups, and the right to instantly receive system upgrades the moment they hit the market.
It is a highly entertaining thought experiment, but the underlying point is dead serious. The author's ultimate conclusion is that there are no magic buttons.
No easy fixes.
There are no shortcuts to a perfect society. Not through mathematical algorithms, not by waiting for ancient alien masters to return, and certainly not by offloading our problems onto sentient robots. We are never going to get something for nothing. Building a resilient society or a new foundation dedicated to art, science, and technology is just going to require an immense amount of incredibly hard, messy human work.
It is a sobering but necessary reality check to a truly wild ride. You really have to wrap your head around it. To recap the journey we've been on today with you, we started by asking if we could mathematically predict society the way we fail to predict the weather.
The butterfly effect.
We explored the Jenga tower fragility of welfare states facing sudden crises and dug into the human desperation to find meaning in historical coincidences like the July 4th paradox. We navigated the fringes of empire collapse, took a massive detour into the negotiating table with unionizing robots.
This raises an important question, something the author didn't explicitly mention, but that naturally flows from all of this chaos. I want to leave you with this final thought to mull over. Let's say psychohistory were perfected. Imagine we actually build a quantum supercomputer capable of predicting human society with 100% mathematical accuracy.
The ultimate machine.
And imagine that computer prints out a document telling us exactly, down to the minute, what our future holds. Would the mere act of us knowing that prediction instantly change our behavior so much that the prediction immediately becomes wrong?
Wow.
Is a perfectly predictable society mathematically impossible simply because human defiance is the one variable an algorithm can never truly capture?
That is a phenomenal question to chew on. Is our defiance the ultimate glitch in the system? We want to thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We know you tune in because you love connecting these bizarre historical dots and challenging your own perspectives. Keep opening those windows in the winter, keep looking for the historical spotlights, and most importantly, keep questioning the patterns around you. We'll see you next time.